Good evening. My friends, I want you to do something with me right now. Before a single word of teaching passes between us, I want you to think of the one thing you have been wanting for longer than feels comfortable to admit. Not the polished version you describe to others. The real one. The private wish you return to in quiet moments. The dream you have visited so many times that the visiting itself has started to feel like having it. Hold that thing gently in your mind. Just for a moment. Now tell me honestly, in all the time you have been wanting it, have you ever truly stopped wanting it and started having it, not pretending, not visualizing, not hoping, actually inhabiting the state of the person who already holds it as a fact of their life? If your honest answer is no, then tonight is the night something changes. Because what I am about to share with you is not a new technique. It is not a harder method or a faster shortcut. It is the correction of the single misunderstanding that has kept you circling your desire for months, perhaps for years, without ever arriving. Before I go on, if this is landing somewhere true inside you, leave a word in the comments. Just one word. Whatever this teaching stirs in you, that small act of acknowledgement does something to the inner world. It commits you, and I want you committed tonight. Also, if you have not yet found your way to this channel, this community of quiet, serious students of the law, consider staying, not for entertainment, for the real work. Now let us go deeper. Here is the reframe I want to plant in you tonight, and I am going to ask you to sit with it rather than argue with it. The wanting is the problem, not the desire. The wanting. There is a difference between those two words that most teachers in this tradition never slow down enough to explain. And that gap in understanding is costing you everything. Desire is natural. Desire is the movement of life reaching toward its own expansion. When you want something, deeply and authentically, that wanting is consciousness pointing in a direction it intends to go. There is nothing wrong with desire. Neville himself said your desires are not accidents. They are invitations. They are the law itself calling you forward. So desire is not your enemy, but wanting. The chronic state of wanting, the posture of the person who is always reaching, always seeking, always one step behind the thing they love. That is the trap. And most people living in this tradition have been told to visualize, affirm, script, and feel their desire. But no one has told them clearly enough that all of that effort, when performed from the state of wanting, simply reinforces the wanting you cannot get to having by staying in wanting. No matter how beautifully you try, this is the wrong way. And I want to name it with as much compassion as I have because I know this is where you have been. You discovered the law. You felt the spark of it. The first quiet recognition that something real was being described. And then you began to practice. You wrote your desires in a journal. You built a vision board. You repeated affirmations in the mirror every morning. You listened to guided meditations at night. You scripted out the life you wanted in careful, loving detail. And some of those things may have even felt good in the moment. But when you looked up from the practice, the circumstances had not moved, or they moved slightly and then returned to where they were. And so you concluded one of three things. Either the law does not work, or it works for other people but not for you, or you are doing something wrong and you just need to find the right technique. I am here to tell you it was none of those things. The law was working perfectly. It was reflecting exactly what you were broadcasting. And what you were broadcasting, beneath all the beautiful effort, was the state of a person who does not yet have the thing, the wanting, the reaching, the slightly desperate quality of someone working very hard to create something they fundamentally believe is not yet theirs. The law does not hear your words. It reads your state. And your state was, and perhaps still is, that of the wanting person, So it kept giving you more wanting, more of the experience of not yet having, more circumstances that confirmed the gap between you and your desire. This is not a failure of character. It is a misunderstanding of mechanism. And tonight we fix the mechanism. So what is actually happening when the law operates? Let me offer you a way of understanding this that I find cleaner than any other. Think of your subconscious mind not as a wishful thinker, but as a very literal recording device. It does not interpret your desires. It does not factor in what you meant to feel or what you were trying to convey. It simply records the state you were actually in while you held the thought. And then it reproduces that state in your outer life with extraordinary faithfulness. This is why revision matters. This is why the feeling of the wish fulfilled is the whole game. Because the subconscious is not writing down the content of your visualization. It is writing down the emotional signature you had while visualizing. The signature of the state. Think of it like this. Imagine you are holding a paintbrush, and the canvas is your outer life. Now imagine that the paintbrush does not respond to what you intend to paint. It responds to how your hand feels while you are holding it. If your hand is tense, urgent, gripping the brush like someone afraid of running out of time, the painting will carry that energy regardless of what image you were trying to create. But if your hand is relaxed, settled, moving with the quiet confidence of someone who has painted this scene 100 times before and knows exactly how it looks when it is finished, the painting will carry that instead. The outer life is always a faithful reproduction of the inner hand. Not the image you were reaching for, the quality of the reaching. So the question you must ask yourself is this. What is the quality of my inner hand? When you sit down to assume your desire, what is the emotional texture of that assumption? Is it the texture of certainty, or is it the texture of hoping? Is it the texture of arrival, or is it the texture of traveling toward? Because the subconscious will reproduce the texture, not the intention. And most people, even the most devoted students of this work, are generating the texture of hoping while believing they are generating the texture of having. This is the gap. This is everything. Let me tell you about a woman I once worked with. She had been studying the law of assumption for nearly 4 years. She was serious about it, not a casual dabbler. She had notebooks filled with her scripting work. She had a morning practice and an evening practice and a nighttime practice before sleep. She had listened to hundreds of hours of teaching. She knew the vocabulary. She could articulate the principles clearly to others. And yet the specific desire she had been working toward, a committed, loving relationship with a particular kind of partner, remained entirely absent from her life. She had been on dates that went nowhere. She had experienced connections that seemed promising and then dissolved. And with each disappointment, she returned to her notebooks and her affirmations with renewed urgency, trying harder, feeling more, visualizing more vividly. When she came to me, I asked her one question. I asked her to show me how she assumed, not to tell me about it, to actually do it in front of me, the way she would do it at home. And she closed her eyes and I watched her face. And within 30 seconds I could see it. There was a subtle but unmistakable tension around her eyes, a slight furrow, the face of someone concentrating very hard on something they needed to be true. The face of effort, the face, if I am honest, of fear dressed up as faith. She was working. She was working so hard to feel the thing she wanted. And that work, that strain, was the very feeling the subconscious was recording, not the love, not the partnership, the work of trying to feel loved, the effort of trying to feel chosen. And the subconscious, faithful recorder that it is, was giving her more of the experience of working hard to feel loved, more of the experience of trying to feel chosen. Without the arrival, I gave her one instruction. I told her to stop practicing. Not permanently, but for a week. I asked her to stop all active assuming, all scripting, Affirmations. Instead, I asked her to do one thing only. Once each day, for no longer than 3 minutes. I asked her to simply notice how someone who was already in that relationship would feel at the most ordinary moments of the day. Not during a meditation, not during a special ritual. While washing the dishes, while driving to work, while making coffee in the morning, what is the background feeling of that person's ordinary day? What is the texture of their inner life when nothing special is happening? Because that is the state, not the peak moment of gratitude or joy. The ordinary background hum of someone for whom love is a fact of their life and not a hope. She came back to me in 3 weeks, not with a story of instant manifestation. Though the relationship did come, and it came within 2 months of that conversation, she came back with something more valuable than a result. She came back with an understanding. She said, I realized I had been treating my desire like a wound I was trying to heal rather than a truth I already inhabited. And the moment I stopped treating it like a wound, the texture of my inner life changed completely. I stopped needing it to happen, not because I stopped wanting it, but because I stopped experiencing the absence of it as a problem to be solved. That is the shift. That is the entire teaching tonight, wrapped inside one woman's story. When you stop experiencing the absence of your desire as a problem to be solved, you have changed states. You have moved from wanting to having, and the subconscious, faithful recorder, faithful mirror, begins writing a new signature onto your outer life. So here is the practice I want to give you. I am going to be very precise because the precision matters. This is not a visualization exercise. This is not an affirmation drill. This is something quieter and more powerful than either of those things. I call it the ordinary hour, because it lives not in your special practice time, but in the most unremarkable moments of your day. Once each day, at a moment when you are doing something physical and routine, washing your hands, preparing food, folding clothes, sitting in your car before you start the engine. I want you to pause for no more than 2 or 3 minutes and ask yourself a single question. What is the background feeling of my life right now, if my desire is already a fact? Not what do I see in that imagined life. Not what is happening in that imagined life. What is the feeling in the background? The hum beneath the activity. The emotional weather of an ordinary Tuesday in the life of the person who already has this. For most people, that background feeling is something like ease, a quiet settledness, a sense that the ground is solid beneath them in this particular area. Not ecstasy, not euphoria. Just the absence of the low-grade anxiety that comes from wanting something you do not feel you have. That absence, that specific quality of stillness where the worry used to live, that is the state you are looking for. Breathe into it for 2 or 3 minutes. Let it be real for that time. Do not force it to be bigger than it is. Do not perform it. Just let it be what it naturally is when you stop fighting for it. Then release it and return to your day. That is the whole practice. 2 or 3 minutes. Once a day. The ordinary hour. Now, I want to explain why this works when more elaborate practices often do not. When you sit down for a formal visualization, several things happen to your nervous system. Awareness of the gap between where you are and where you want to be becomes acute. The act of closing your eyes and reaching for a different reality implicitly confirms that the different reality is not the one you are currently in. And without meaning to, you bring the state of the wanter to the practice rather than the state of the haver. Your subconscious notices. It always notices. But when you slip into the background feeling of already having during a routine moment, none of those alarm bells get triggered. You are not reaching. You are simply resting in a different quality of attention. The nervous system stays quiet. The ego does not rise up to defend the current reality because you have not directly challenged it. You have simply let another feeling exist alongside the ordinary activity of your day. And in that unguarded moment, the subconscious receives a clean recording, the signature of ease, the signature of having, and it begins, quietly and without drama, to reproduce that signature in your outer world. This is why Neville spoke so often about the state akin to sleep, that drowsy, relaxed threshold between waking and dreaming, as the ideal time for assumption, not because there is anything magical about being sleepy, but because in that state the critical faculty is quiet. The part of the mind that argues, that measures, that says this is not true yet, that part is half asleep. And so the assumption slips in without resistance. The ordinary hour works on a similar principle. When your hands are busy and your critical mind is occupied with the task at hand, the back door to the subconscious is gently unlatched. And that is when you walk through it, quietly, without announcement, carrying the background feeling of a life in which your desire is already a settled fact. Now I want to invite you into a 7-day training because I have found that 7 days is the minimum time required for a new inner signature to begin feeling natural rather than constructed. For the first 3 days, you are simply learning to find the feeling. Do not judge whether you are doing it correctly. Do not measure whether it is working. Just practice identifying the background feeling once each day during a routine moment and resting in it for 2 to 3 minutes. Some days it will feel easy and clean. Other days it will feel vague and hard to locate. Both experiences are valid. You are not graded on this. You are simply learning to find the frequency. By day 3, something tends to shift. The feeling begins to be slightly more accessible. You may find it arriving on its own at unexpected moments. Not during your practice, but while you are in the middle of something else entirely. A quiet sense of okayness about the thing you have been carrying as a problem. This is not imagination. This is the subconscious beginning to respond. It is the first green shoot. Days 4 through 6 are for deepening. Your only task during these days is to notice every time you feel the old state returning. The wanting, the absence, the low-grade anxiety, and to recognize it for what it is. Not a message about your reality. Not evidence about the future. Just a signal that you have temporarily slipped out of the state you have chosen. When you notice it, do not scold yourself. Do not dramatize it. Simply return to the background feeling. Even for 30 seconds. That return is the practice. The returning is more powerful than the staying. On day 7, I want you to do something a little different. I want you to spend 5 minutes. Just 5. Noticing what has been different about your inner life over the past 6 days. Not what has changed in your outer circumstances. Though there may be small things worth noting. But what has been different in the texture of your daily experience? Has the anxiety about this desire been slightly quieter than usual? Have there been moments where you forgot to worry about it? Have you found yourself thinking about other things with more ease? These are not small things. These are the reports of a changing inner signature. Write them down somewhere. Not because you need to track your progress, but because the act of acknowledging inner change reinforces it. The subconscious hears you saying this is becoming real, and it writes that down too. After the 7 days, the practice does not end, but it changes character. What was intentional begins to become natural. The background feeling of already having stops being something you visit and starts being the weather of your ordinary days. Not all day, every day. Perfectly maintained. Life is not that tidy, and this teaching is not asking for perfection. But the center of gravity of your inner life shifts. The resting state is no longer wanting, it is having. And once that shift happens at the level of the resting state, the outer world begins its rearrangement in earnest. You will notice first in small things. The way a conversation goes differently than you expected. The way an opportunity appears that you were not looking for. The way something that used to feel like a wall starts to feel more like a door. Slightly open, as if it had been ajar for a while and you simply had not noticed. These are not coincidences. These are the early deliveries of the new inner signature you have been planting. Do not celebrate them too loudly. Meaning, do not let them become the source of your feeling. The feeling must remain yours regardless of outer confirmation. But you can notice them with quiet satisfaction, the satisfaction of someone who planted a seed and is watching the soil begin to move. Knowing the rest is simply a matter of patience. I want to speak to the question of impatience because it will come. Probably around day 4 or day 5. The mind will begin to ask the question. But when will I actually see it? When will the outer world confirm what I am building inside? This question feels reasonable. It feels like common sense. But it is the voice of the wanting state trying to reassert itself. And if you answer it, if you begin measuring your outer reality for evidence of progress, you pull yourself back into the posture of the person waiting for proof. And the subconscious, which was beginning to record the signature of having, gets interrupted. It receives the signal of waiting instead. And it reproduces that. The answer to the impatience question is this. You are not waiting for proof. You are being the proof. The person who already has the thing does not wake up each morning scanning the horizon for confirmation that they have it. They already know. The knowing is not based on outer evidence. The knowing is the state. And the state is what creates the evidence, not the other way around. So when impatience arrives, and it will, I want you to treat it as useful information. It is telling you that you have temporarily slipped out of the state of having and back into the state of waiting. That is all. No drama. No failure. Just a signal. And you know what to do with the signal. You return to the background feeling of the ordinary hour. Even for 30 seconds. You water the seed again and you trust the soil. There is one more thing I want to say before we close tonight. And it is perhaps the most quietly radical thing in this entire teaching. The state of already having your desire does not require you to believe that you deserve it. This is where so many students get derailed. They begin the work of assuming, and then the subconscious presents its objections. Who are you to have this? Do you remember what you did? Do you know how many people want this and do not have it? Why would you be the exception? These voices are not the truth about you. They are old recordings, old seeds that were planted by someone else long before you were old enough to choose your own assumptions. But they feel true because they are familiar, and familiarity is often mistaken for truth. You do not need to silence these voices before you begin practicing. You do not need to complete some inner healing journey before you are allowed to inhabit the state of having. The state is available to you right now, exactly as you are. With all of your doubt and all of your history and all of your complicated feelings about whether you are worthy of the thing you want. The law does not require your worthiness. It requires your assumption. Worthiness is a moral judgment that has nothing to do with the mechanics of how consciousness creates experience. The seed does not ask whether the soil deserves to grow something beautiful. It simply grows where it is planted. So plant the seed. Not when you feel ready. Not when you have resolved all your doubts. Not when you have convinced yourself you deserve it. Now, in the ordinary moments of today, in the 2 or 3 minutes while your hands are busy and your critical mind is occupied with something else, bring the background feeling of the life in which your desire is a settled fact. Rest in it for a moment. Then let your day continue. This is not a dramatic practice. It will not feel like a breakthrough in the moment. Most of the most powerful inner work looks entirely unremarkable from the outside. But something is happening beneath the surface. The signature is changing. The subconscious is taking new notes. And the outer world, that faithful, slightly slow, always loyal mirror, is preparing its response. What does life feel like on the other side of this? I want to paint that picture for you. Not as a distant reward, but as a description of what becomes ordinary. On the other side of this shift, you stop having a complicated relationship with your desire. It is no longer the thing you want and cannot have, or the thing you are trying very hard to create. It is simply a direction you are moving in. With ease, the way water moves toward the sea without effort or drama. You will still take action. Of course you will. But the action will come from a different place. Not from urgency. Not from fear. From natural movement, the way a person walks toward the kitchen to make breakfast. Not because they are desperate for food, but because it is simply what happens next in a life organized around nourishment. You will also stop interpreting delays as failures. When something takes longer than you expected, or when an old pattern resurfaces briefly, you will meet it with something close to mild interest rather than panic. You will know, not as a belief you are working to maintain, but as a simple fact of your inner life, that the outer is always catching up to the inner, and that the catching up happens in its own time, not yours. This is not resignation. It is the opposite of resignation. It is the settled confidence of someone who understands the mechanism so thoroughly that they no longer need to manage it, only to tend to their own state of being and trust the rest. The ease is real. The settledness is real. I am not describing a spiritual fantasy. I am describing what happens in an ordinary human life when the center of gravity moves from wanting to having. Everything does not change at once, but the quality of daily experience shifts in ways that matter enormously. The low-grade exhaustion of chronic wanting, that background hum of not yet, not yet, not quite, not enough, begins to quiet. And in the quiet, you find something you may have forgotten was possible. The simple satisfaction of being where you are, exactly as you are, with your desire already planted and already growing in the only soil that has ever mattered. Walk out of here tonight, not with a new technique to perform, but with a new state to inhabit. The state of the person for whom the desire is already done, not done in the future, done in the inner world, which is the only world that is ever truly real. The outer will follow. It always has. It always will. There is a quiet law running beneath every human life, and most people spend that life unaware of its presence, pushing against it, working around it, occasionally stumbling into alignment with it and calling the result luck. But you are not here by accident tonight. You are here because something in you already recognizes the truth of what we have been exploring. The wanting is the problem. The state is the solution. The ordinary hour is the practice. And the background feeling of already having is the seed from which everything else grows. You came to this work, perhaps because something in your life was not reflecting what you held in your heart. And you have tried many things to change that reflection. You have worked hard, perhaps harder than anyone around you knows. And there is something I want to honor about that effort. Even as I am asking you to lay part of it down, the effort came from love. It came from caring about your life and refusing to accept that what you see is all there is. That refusal is not something to abandon. It is something to redirect. Direct it not toward harder trying, but toward quieter inhabiting. Not toward more forceful reaching, but toward more settled resting in the state you have chosen. The teacher in this tradition, the one whose words have been studied and restudied for generations, Neville Goddard, said something that I return to again and again. He said that the secret of imagining is the greatest of all problems, to the solution of which every person should aspire. For supreme power, supreme wisdom, supreme delight lie in the far-off solution of this mystery, not in the beginner's understanding of it. In the far-off, deep, lived, embodied understanding of it. Tonight we have moved one step in that direction, not by learning something new, but by releasing something old. The exhausting, faithful, well-meaning posture of the wanter, and in its place, beginning to know the quiet revolutionary power of the haver. You are the one who decides which of those people you are in any given moment, not circumstances, not time, not the opinions of others or the evidence of your senses. You, in the ordinary moments of your day, in the background feeling of your inner life, in the 2 or 3 minutes while your hands are busy and your critical mind is resting. That is where the work lives. That is where the life is built. Go now and be the one who already has it. Not tomorrow, tonight, in the most ordinary moment before you sleep. Rest in the background feeling of that life. Just for a moment. Let it be real. Let it be yours. Because it already is. Until we meet again in consciousness, carry the state as naturally as you carry your own name. It is done. It has always been done. The world is simply catching up.